You guys want to hear a scary story? It reminds me a lot of Insidious, but it's real. One time when I was babysitting these two girls, talked about them in a video before this. We were going to call the older one Luna and the younger one Aura. That's what I called them last time. I was babysitting, and the older one had an imaginary friend that she called Pete. I would always sense weird energy in this house. Disturbing, dark, like not good, friendly Casper the Ghost. And then one time, the oldest Luna at the time was, I want to say she was 3 or 4. And the baby, Aura, was like 6 months old. And I had put Aura down for bed. Put her in her little swaddle, got her all set up. She was snug as a bug, cute, perfect sleeping. And me and Luna were out in the living room because I was like, okay, we can play one game together like before you go to sleep because Aura obviously went to bed a little bit earlier. I think we pulled out like Candyland, some board game, which obviously she doesn't know how to play the ins and outs and the rules because she's 3. But when we were playing, she had another little character and it was Pete's, right? And every time, I swear to God, I would look away, I'd look back and it would move, and she'd be like, oh, Pete moved it. And I'm like, okay, Luna, like, you obviously moved it, you know? Like, she's 3, and I know she's just like, you know, she doesn't know how to play the game. Now I know it was literally this dark spirit that was moving it, but stay with me. I'm like, okay, Luna, sure. And then out of nowhere, we're playing, and the TV was on in the background, excuse me. And Luna goes, I love this song. And I'm like listening. I'm like, what song, baby? Like, I don't hear any music. And she said, oh, the song that Pete is singing to me. She said, it's a song that my daddy plays on his guitar because their dad played guitar, I guess. Like, I'd always see the guitar. Sometimes it'd be in the living room or sometimes it'd be in the parents' room. Like, when I'd go in there to grab stuff for the kids, it was just like always propped against a wall. And I was like, oh, that's nice. Like, remember what we said about Pete? Because I told her I didn't want her talking to Pete because, again, this felt like a dark energy. And it sucked because every time I was there, I felt like he was sitting in between me and her. Like, he was always, the spirit, Pete, was always hovering. It would never go away. So anyways, I'm like, what song? Blah, blah. And she's like, I'm trying to get her to describe to me again. She's 3. She doesn't really know how to describe it. And she says, no, Pete said he'll play for you. And I said, no, that's okay. Like, want anything to do with it? She said, no, he'll play for you. Just hold on. So I ignore it and we start playing this game again. Just moving little pieces across the board. And all of a sudden I hear the strum of a guitar. Just a solo strum, like an off chord. And I just get chills down my back because at this time the guitar was in the parents' room. I only knew that. I hadn't gone in their room that time, but because I heard it and their door was shut. And Luna jumps up. She's like, oh, I told you, Riley. Like, I told you. Pete said he'd show you the song. It's my favorite song. And I'm terrified. Like, I'm trying so hard to act cool. I don't know how this little girl is not so scared. But I'm just like, oh, okay, hold on. Let me just go look real quick. Because my immediate thought was like, maybe somebody's in the house. Like, a real person. Because that sounded way too real. It literally was just a strum of a guitar. So I go into the parents' room, I turn on all the lights, the guitar is just sitting against the wall. Nobody's in the house. I do a sweep, and I'm like really disturbed because every sweep I'm doing, I feel like something is just hovering and following me into every room I'm going into. So I finally sit back down with her. I'm like, okay, babe, let's watch like 10 more minutes of the show, and then like we're gonna go to bed. When I sat on the couch with her, it was the first time I felt like not super heavy, overpowering energy, and I'm like, whew, okay, like. But anyways, I was like, okay, this feels a little less heavy. Sorry, my dog's drinking water in the background. She's so loud. So I'm like, okay, I can breathe a little bit. And I pick up the baby monitor right next to us. You guys know what's coming. You've seen the scary movies because it literally was just like that. Pick up the baby monitor to check on Aura. And I literally gag when I think about this because it was so terrifying. I see a hand, right next to the baby. She's sleeping, she's swaddling, and it's a creepy hand where the nails are like this long, and it's just this black, shadowy hand just right next to her. And again, this is the first time I said I felt relieved, like I wasn't being followed. It's because it went in the other room. I freak out. I literally sprinted, ran, busted into Aura's room, woke her up because I came in the door so hot. She was crying and just felt that energy in that room was disgusting. I pick her up, I bring her back out to the living room. I'm like trying to explain to the parents when they come home, like they're gonna think I'm insane of why their kids are still awake. And I'm sitting on the couch with the baby and with Luna, and I forgot to turn off the baby monitor. And I literally hear just disembodied voices coming from the baby monitor. Terrifying, out of nowhere, loud. And I literally just shut the baby monitor off. And the baby ended up falling back asleep in my arms. Luna ended up falling back asleep, and she like fell asleep on me, like her little head was on my shoulder. When the parents came out, I was like, sorry, they're just like so sweet, and they just wanted to sleep out here with me. Because I tried again to, like I've explained this in the other video, but I tried to kind of bring it up to them before, how like something I thought was going on in their house paranormal, and they looked at me like I was fucking insane. So I knew I wasn't getting anywhere with that. But that was also one of the terrifying times I experienced babysitting for those kids.
Want to hear something scary? Have you heard the creepypasta called I Work on the Farm My Father Gave Me, and he had me doing the strangest tasks? Me neither. You want to hear the story? Jake lived on a small farm with his mom and his dad. His younger childhood years were not so bad as far as he could remember, but when he reached the age of 7, he began having the same nightmare. He would be running through the woods surrounding the farm with his pet rabbit laughing and having fun, when one day the rabbit ran farther than normal. It ran into the woods past the willow where he wasn't supposed to go. The ground became soft and mushy, and in the distance, right as the rabbit jumped, the ground opened up, seeping a yellowish goo and swallowed the rabbit whole, followed by a wet tearing sound. Not too long after this dream started to occur, his mom tragically passed away, leaving him and his father alone. His dad was not a kind man. His dad used to pull him around, used to insult him, call him useless, especially after his mom died. In fact, his last memory of his mom was one early morning after his dad had once again called him useless and left him crying. His mother kneeled down in front of him with a red ribbon tying her blonde hair back, as she told him to be kind to his father, and that he was going through a lot. She told him that being kind, even when someone doesn't deserve it, is what makes you better than them. And with that, she sent him off to school, telling him to be careful and come home quickly after. Fast forward a few years, Jake now lives in the city and works at a grocery store, occasionally fixing the computers and technology there, finding that he has a talent for it. Despite this, his debt is piling up. He can't pay off credit cards, and the rent is only going up. He also hasn't been home in a few years and didn't plan to return, not wanting to be around his dad, for obvious reasons. After the death of his mom, his dad became much more violent and cruel. As I said before, he'd drag him across the porch floor for the slightest mistake, slap him over the back of the head for dropping grain bags literally twice his size, and call him useless. Calling him that was a pattern. Because of all these things, he literally never planned to go home. The second he was 18, he got a credit card and he took the first bus to the city. Okay? He got a call from his old neighbor, Ruth. Ruth used to be close to him and his mom. Not with his dad, but Ruth, whatever, is getting in other people's business. They hadn't talked in a while, and she didn't tell him to come home, only that his father was getting very sick and could no longer tend to the farm and needed help. Not wanting to go home, but also too guilty to leave his dad alone, Jake quit his job for his dad, in spite of the bills he needed to pay, and packed his bags and headed for home. When he arrived, his dad was sitting outside on the porch, looking much older and frailer than he used to. His hands were shaking as he pushed the rocking chair off to stand. His father was much nicer now. He seemed softer and calmer, and even offered to help him with his bags. And failed. He almost fell over and fell into the car. Over the next few weeks, Jake's dad taught him how to do the farm work that needed to be done, like fixing doors, hammering in posts, tending to the crops, and he felt like him and his dad finally started to build the father-son relationship he always wanted, and he could almost sometimes look past the things he had done to him when he was a child. That is insane to me. After everything he did. Just look, okay. However, as the days went on, he noticed a pattern. Once a week, his dad took a goat from the barn, wrapped a rope around its neck, and guided it into the woods past the willow and onto the mossy ground, only to return empty-handed every time. When Jake asked his dad about this, he was shut down immediately and constantly every time he asked, so Jake learned not to ask any more questions. Months went past of the same routine, and he finally started to like what he saw in the mirror, as the constant strain on his body started to show. But as his body got stronger, his dad only grew weaker. He came outside one afternoon to find his dad tying a rope to the goat again. So at this point, things are starting to go downhill. Jake offered to help his dad and just take the goat himself to whatever task his dad has been doing, but his dad refused again and insisted that he could do it. Knowing how stubborn his dad could be, Jake just decided to let it go and assumed it would be fine. But as the hour passed without him getting back, he grew concerned and went outside to check, only to see the goat at the edge of the tree line with the rope still attached to its neck, but his dad nowhere in sight. He immediately started running through the woods, past the willow and onto the mossy ground, only to find his dad bent over, heaving and shaking. He ran over, picking him up, and carried him inside before sitting him on the couch and making sure he was okay. His dad laid there for a few moments, wheezing and coughing, before looking up at him and stating that it was almost his time, and that it was finally time for Jake to know how he kept the farm so healthy. He explained that the dream that Jake had when he was a child wasn't a dream at all. It was a memory, and Jake's discovery is what led to his father's job being saved and the farm. The farm at the time stopped growing crops, and the animals started to die. The chickens stopped laying eggs, the soil got moldy, and the cows got diseases. His parents didn't know what to do, and were about to go bankrupt, until Jake's pet bunny got swallowed up by the land. The day after that, the land flourished, and so did the animals. I'm sure you know where this is going. From that day on, once a week, his dad took a goat into the woods past the willow and threw it into the hole, and the next day they'd have the best livestock and crops in the town. Jake looked down at his dad as he told him this, and although he was disgusted, he'd agreed to help him. Leaving his dad inside, he walked back onto the porch and over the tree line, seeing the goat still wandering there, before he picked it up and threw it into the hole as well. The next day, the land flourished, and the cycle continued every week for over a month. Jake slowly got more accustomed to this task and had less trouble completing it. But one night, as the sun fell over the horizon, Jake wandered outside to complete his weekly chore. He grabbed a weak lamb who was born wrong and carried it into the woods past the willow. And as he walked up to the gaping hole in the ground, the stench never getting any easier but somehow more intense than usual, his foot slipped, and he dropped the lamb, falling forward, but catching himself on the rim of the hole. Jumping up quickly and disgusted by the wet, slimy feeling, he refocused and looked down, noticing something red in the yellow sludge, and squinted. Leaning down, he carefully picked it up, rubbing it between his fingers. It was a red ribbon. Forgetting the lamb, he turned, sprinting to the makeshift grave behind the old barn and grabbed a shovel. I didn't mention this earlier. When his mother died, his dad didn't tell him and buried her behind the barn and made a makeshift grave with a cross. That's not at all, suspicious. I don't even... He stood there for hours, well into the night, digging, but when he finished, the hole where his mom should be was empty. Filled with an anger he's never felt before, he turned, stalking back to the house, where his dad sat inside on the couch watching an old TV show. Jake slammed open the door, throwing the ribbon at his dad and demanding to know why he lied. He told him he knew what he did, and that his mother didn't just fall, he unalived her. His dad looked at him for a long moment, before breaking into tears and sobbing as he explained himself. Apparently, his mom didn't understand or approve of what his dad was doing. I wonder why. And they argued a lot, with the mom threatening to leave him and take Jake with her because the land, once again, was suffering and they were going broke. They were also running out of animals to use, and the crops hadn't been good in weeks. In the middle of the argument, however, his dad got angry and pushed his mom, who fell back, breaking her neck. He looked down at her and contemplated calling an ambulance, but then looked to the land that was dying. So he reached down, grabbing his wife, who's practically there too, and grabbed her by the ankle, pulling her into the woods past the willow. The next morning, the land flourished. Jake looks at his dad as he tells him the story, sobbing and telling him he wouldn't understand, and that he did what he had to do, and the land had to be fed. Jake looked at him silently for a long moment, the house quiet, and the ribbon still sat in his dad's lap, before he steps forward, yanking his dad up by the wrist, and saying, "Then let's feed it." It didn't take long for his dad to realize what he was doing. He begged and cried as he was pulled out onto the porch, onto the cold grass. Jake ignored him as they made their way into the woods and past the willow, the stench getting stronger with every step. He reached down, grabbing his father, and held him up over the hole, demanding he tell him why he did it, but his dad had no answer. Jake, distraught and angry, asked him what his mom said when he did this to her, and his dad, between tears, said, "She was a good person. She would have forgiven me." He looked at his dad for a long moment, the only sound the shallow wind and crickets chirping, before he opened his hands, and that familiar wet tearing sound cracked through the woods. That's when he realized he's a lot more like his father than he thought.
Can we show him the older homestead?
Yeah, let's go. As you know.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Was that you?
Yeah, that's on either side.
It went to both.
Yeah.
On the morning of December 21st, 1980, a woman in her 40s walked into a jail cell in Los Angeles, California. Now, in this jail cell already was another inmate. Her name was Etta Louise Smith. She was 32 years old, and at the time, she was laying on one of the benches inside of this cell. Etta had actually been in jail for 4 days leading up to this moment. The police were sure Etta had something to do with the savage murder of a nurse in the area, but they really didn't understand what role she had played. In fact, virtually everything about Etta was very confusing to police. And Etta herself was not really doing herself any favors because she wasn't really explaining how she had the information that she had. Now, Etta had already gone through a 10-hour-long interrogation, which led police nowhere. She had undergone a polygraph test, which didn't lead to any new answers. And she had also undergone a thorough strip search. She had been kept without food for 24 hours at one point. She had been left in this cold jail cell without shoes for 4 days. But she just wouldn't crack. She would not confess to playing a role in this murder. And so this was why police on this day had decided to go another route to get information out of Etta. That woman in her 40s who had just walked into Etta's jail cell was pretending to be an inmate, but in reality, she was an undercover cop. And her job was to go into this jail cell, befriend Etta, win her trust, and see if maybe then Etta would begin revealing information about what she had done. And so after this undercover cop walked into the jail cell, the jailer shut the door behind them, closing in the undercover cop and Etta. And at this point, Etta was woken up by the noise and she sat up on her bench and she looked over at the undercover cop. And the cop, she was immediately struck by Etta's appearance. Etta did not look like a murderer. She was this little, slight, totally unthreatening person who really just looked like a suburban mom who maybe had a white-collar job. But the undercover cop also knew that appearing to be totally harmless was a great cover for being a murderer, and so this could all totally be an act. And also, to this undercover cop, it just seemed like Etta was way too calm and collected given her circumstances. She is effectively wanted for murder, and the police are putting so much pressure on her to get her to speak about it, and she's just laying down sleeping in her cell, making no big deal about it. But the undercover cop maintained a very neutral persona, and she sat down, and at some point she asked Etta, hey, what are you in here for? And Etta, she kind of just looked down and smiled for a second, and then when she looked back up at the undercover cop, she said, you're never going to believe me. The undercover cop at this said, oh, come on, how bad could it be? Tell me what's going on here. Why are you in here? And it was at this point that Etta would say something that nearly caused the cop to break character. Because Etta, she would say, well, I'm pretty sure this is going to be a movie. Now, the undercover police officer tried to be as neutral as possible as she's hearing this, but in her mind, she's like, okay, well, I clearly just discovered Etta's motive for being involved in this murder. Etta wants to be famous. She wants this made into a movie where she's the star. At the same time this conversation was happening, in an office within the jailhouse, a police captain was listening in on the conversation between Etta and this undercover cop. And when he listened to Etta talk about wanting to turn her story into a movie, he just shook his head in disgust because Etta had just brought police to the location of the body of 31-year-old Melanie Uribe, a local nurse who was robbed and savagely beaten to death and then dumped in a canyon behind a bush. And now here Etta was talking about how she could get publicity around this terrible, horrible crime. It just did not sit right with the captain. And so as the captain was sitting there kind of watching this conversation transpire between the undercover cop and Etta, the captain was beginning to form a theory of what actually happened to Melanie Uribe and how Etta played a role in her murder. His theory went like this. 6 days earlier, the victim, Melanie Uribe, had left for her shift at the hospital in Burbank, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, but she had never arrived for her shift. And so when her colleagues had noticed her absence, eventually the police were called and a search was launched to find her. But after 48 hours, the police had not found Melanie and there were no signs as to what happened to her. She had just vanished. And it was at that point, 2 days after Melanie had gone missing, that Etta just showed up at the police station and said she knew where Melanie was. And so the detective who was talking to Etta at the time when she came in and said this, he brought out a map and he said, okay, point to where she is. And Etta had immediately pointed to this area on the map called Lopez Canyon, which was about 25 miles away from Los Angeles. And she would tell the detective that, yeah, Melanie is somewhere right in there. When the detective asked Etta, how do you know this? Etta would say she just knew. And then when the detective followed up and said, Etta, this is pretty incriminating that you're telling me you know where someone's body is. What's motivating you to come and say this to me? And Etta would say that her conscience was weighing on her terribly, and she just had to go to police. Now, the detective who talked to Etta when she first came into the police station really didn't know what to make of Etta, because she looked so unthreatening, and what she was saying, she was saying with a lot of confidence, and it seemed like she was really eager to help the investigation versus just clearing her conscience, which is kind of what she said she was doing. And when the detective looked into who Etta was, he discovered that she had a great job. She worked at an aerospace company in Burbank, California, and she even had governmental clearance. And so this woman clearly has been vetted by the government and by high-level companies, and she's passed the tests. But at the same time, the detective knew there was no good reason for why Etta would have this information, the location of a dead body. I mean, either she's just wrong and there is no body there, or if the body's there, the most likely scenario is that Etta was involved in killing this person or disposing of their body, or maybe both. So the detective said to Etta, hey, come back tomorrow and we'll take a police helicopter, we'll fly out over that canyon, and we'll see if we can find Melanie's body together. And so Etta said, okay, sounds good. She turned and she left. But then just an hour later, Etta came back into the police station with her 2 young kids in the car.
What the fuck was that? Bro!
What's going on around you?
I don't know. I'm frozen. I am frozen.
Did the window
Sean.
break?
So tonight's true scary story is about a girl who literally witnessed 2 possessions and then got possessed herself from being around witchcraft. It is an insane story. It might be the craziest story I've heard yet. There are biblical references in this too also, so if you do not like that, then scroll. Remember, you guys, if TikTok goes away, my YT is in my link in my bio, and I literally post on there every single day. So you are not losing me. You just have to go over there to see me every day. My IG is right here. I will leave it up for a minute. So today's submitter's name is Jay, and that's not her real name. She wanted to remain anonymous, so that's what we're going to call her. Jay grew up in Mississippi. Now, her older sister was a party girl. When she was about 11 years old, her older sister lived in an apartment that her father owned. She said that her sister was always partying, always drinking, always doing things that she wasn't supposed to do. One day, her sister is sitting in her apartment and she is reading a book in a recliner by her bay window, when all of a sudden she looks over at the window and she sees a reflection behind her. This reflection had horns and a huge head, and she absolutely freaks out. She jumps off the recliner, she runs into her room, and she calls her mother. Now, her mother is very religious, and her mother convinces her to come home and go to church with her. Now, this actually takes a lot of convincing because her sister does not want to go to church, but after they finally convince her to do so, she goes to the church and she goes and sees the pastor, and the pastor then takes all of the children that are in the church with them at that time and puts them in a Sunday room away from her. He believes that she is possessed. After looking at her, after examining her and talking to her, this is what he believes. Now, Jay was one of these little kids that the pastor put in the Sunday room, and she wanted to see what was going on with her sister, so her and her friend actually snuck out, and they were looking through the window to see what was going on with the pastor, her sister, and her mother. And what they saw was horrific. So what they see is the pastor and a bunch of other people start praying around her sister. Her sister immediately starts swinging on the pastor. She then drops to the ground and starts crawling around on the floor like a snake, like in between chairs and furniture. Then stands back up, her mom calls her name, and she looks over at her mom like this, and it looks nothing like her sister. Her mom, the pastors, and the other people then have to grab her sister and hold her down. As they are doing this, her little sister is looking from the window, and she all of a sudden sees 8 white clouds, like clouds of smoke, form above her and then just move down the hallway as if 8 things were coming out of her sister. Jay said that she had never seen anything like it. When all of a sudden her sister gets up, she starts crying and she hugs her mom and says, "I am so sorry. I am so sorry. That was not me. I am so sorry." Her sister is okay after that, but then unfortunately 2 years later, she was unalived by a heart attack. So whether this was created from that or not, they do not know, but that is absolutely heart-wrenching. She was so young. Fast forward to when Jay is now 16 years old. She's in her computer room and she is playing with her friend on the computer. They are sitting on 2 chairs. One of the chairs has wheels and the other one does not. Her friend Dana is on the chair with no wheels, when all of a sudden it just slides backwards super fast into the filing cabinet, just whew, into the filing cabinet. Jay and Dana are absolutely freaking out at this point, and they run into the living room and they tell their mom what's happening. Well, they tell Jay's mom what's happening, and Jay's mom is like, it's okay. She calms them down. But later on, a few days later, Jay's mom is sitting in the living room and she's watching TV, and there's Uno cards on top of their mantle, when all of a sudden the Uno cards, with absolutely no breeze whatsoever, just start slowly flying off the mantle, one by one by one. So Jay's mom's brother is a pastor, and so she calls him and she's like, we need your help. And he comes over and he blesses the house. And after he blesses the house, this actually works for about 1 year. But then 1 year later, Jay, her friend Dana, and another person are in a car and they are driving around a curb, when all of a sudden they're driving around a curb and Dana just falls to the floor of the car and she starts screaming, it's burning, it's burning, it's burning. Jay immediately is like, oh my God. She thinks back to her sister and she's like, something is happening to her. What if this is another demon incident? So she lifts her hands off of the steering wheel and starts praying over her friend. She says she has no idea how the steering wheel did not like go into a brush or like crash the car, but it didn't. She lifted her hands, the car stayed straight, and she just prayed over her friend. While Jay is praying over her friend, all of a sudden her friend just starts cussing her out, screaming at her. So Jay's like, we're turning the car around right now. I'm calling my mom. We have to go meet my mom. So she calls her mom and she's like, we're coming over. Something is happening to Dana again. So she turns the car around, she goes home, her mom is waiting outside for her, and she immediately gets Dana out of the car, and Dana is like, calm down a little bit as soon as they got into the house, and Dana just keeps saying, my back, my back, my back hurts so bad. So Jay is like, we need to pull up your shirt and see what's going on. So they pull up her shirt, and what she sees is like, it's straight out of a movie. They see a huge cross on her back, but not just a cross. It looked like a bullwhip had whipped her this way and then whipped her that way. And then she also has scratches all over her thighs and her legs. Again, her mom calls her brother and she's like, you need to get over here. Something is happening again. So her brother comes over, and as soon as her brother gets out of the car, he doesn't even step foot into the house before he says, someone here has been playing with witchcraft. Her uncle had two of her cousins with them, and as soon as they came inside of the house, Dana looks at Jay and says, please don't do this. This will break us apart. And at the time, Jay had no idea what she was talking about. So Jay's mom actually calls the third person that was in the car. Her name was Elle, and she calls her over so that her brother, Jay's uncle, can come over and actually pray over Jay. He starts to pray over Jay. He puts his hand on her head, starts praying, and then Jay's sister comes over, throws her down, puts her hand on her forehead, and says, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. She then says, I see my baby sister, and all of a sudden Jay gets violently ill. She just starts throwing up green stuff, and she said that everything went black. She doesn't really remember anything that happened, except for she remembers her throwing up, and she remembers that everyone was praying except for Dana. Dana was sitting by the bay window and just like in a fetal position. Now, why they were praying over Jay, I'm not sure. She thinks that it may be because she was playing with a Ouija board when she was younger, or because she found out that Dana was practicing witchcraft and she was hanging out with Dana. Now, Jay looks at her uncle and she's like, I don't understand what just happened. And he's like, you had something inside of you. And she's like, how? I was just praying earlier over Dana. How could I have something inside of me if I was praying? And he said, just because you are praying doesn't mean that you don't have anything inside of you. You've been around a bunch of negative things in your life, and it just accumulated, and now it entered you. Jay is no longer friends with Dana because she still practices witchcraft, and Jay is actually a Christian and still goes to church to this day. But she just wanted to make it very clear that demons are real and that this really can happen to people. She wanted to give a warning. She also said that if you get possessed and something happens to you because you are doing something that you shouldn't be, or around people that you shouldn't be that are doing things wrong, that if you get it out of you and then you go back to that lifestyle afterwards, that 7 demons are supposed to return. Now, she actually sent me a picture of the demon that her sister saw when she was laying back in the recliner and saw that reflection in the window. So this is what she saw. This is what she said she saw. And then this is the Bible verse that talks about how 7 demons will return if you go back to your old ways after you were already possessed. It's right here. Now, she is going to be reading all the comments, so if you guys have any comments for her, suggestions, point of views, drop them in the comments. She will be reading them. Also, I would like to know what your thoughts are on this. What the hell do you think happened here? Because this was absolutely insane. Do not play with witchcraft. Do not play with Ouija boards. Do not play with any of that stuff. It is so freaking dangerous. Guys, my name is Kaisa. I give true scary stories on here every single night, and this may be my last story on here, and that will be so incredibly sad. But if it is, like I said, I am on YT and IG. My YT is right here. here, and my IG is right here. I'm gonna give it to you guys again. I absolutely love you. Your support means everything to me. You guys have made this platform just a way for me to express my creativity, and I could not thank you more for that. Please keep emailing your true scary stories. My email is in my bio, and leave your YouTube handle. That is where I will be. So leave that handle when you tell me the true scary story. As if you want to be tagged. Otherwise, if you want to remain anonymous, I will absolutely do that for you. I take anonymity very seriously. Otherwise, I just need you guys to do one last thing for me. One more time. Hopefully not one more time, but what is it? Have a spooky night. Love you guys so much.